Today in this video, we're going to go over how to model using tileable textures and trim sheets. If you're interested in creating environment art for video games, this is kind of the secret of how to get really nice looking materials on large spaces of environments without having a whole bunch of unwraps and textures. So first, I'm just going to make a really simple floor. This doesn't actually require too much modeling. I'm just going to create a plane and I'm going to set this to a nicer size. So I'm going to maybe make it to be about 2.5 meters wide, and we'll just do 5 meters long. I don't really need any subdivisions with this, so I'm going to take those out. And this is just going to be my floor. All right, so let me assign my first material. So I haven't created any yet, so I do need to make a new material that I'm going to use a Lambert shader on. I'm going to name this one Wood Floor Matte and assign a base color texture to this. So one thing to keep in mind with doing this kind of process is that we don't actually need to try to make a full PBR material in Maya. All we need to be able to see is our base color. So don't try to set up anything crazy. We just need to see the base color so that we can accurately unwrap our stuff to here. Hold on. I'm having a bit of an issue. Let's try this again. It's acting up. There we go. Okay, that looks better. We need to be able to see the base color so that we can see how the texture is going to look on it. Working with tileables and trim sheets, you're almost kind of doing things backwards. You need to know what textures you're going to be using so that you can model to those textures versus modeling first and then taking that model over into something like Substance Painter and creating the textures after the fact. So it's a little bit hard for me to kind of figure out size on this. So what I usually like to do when I'm working with environments is I do create a kind of like a mini person. Well, not a mini person, I guess like a really low end person model, which is usually just a cube set to the correct size. So I'm going to make it, 0.5 meter by 2 meters tall and 0.5 meter. This is a tall person. If you kind of convert this to feet and inches, if that's what you're more comfortable with, this is about a 6'5" person. If you drop the height down to like 175 centimeters, that's closer to like a 5'8" person. So anywhere kind of in that range works pretty well. But sticking with 6'5", we know if that 6'5" person can move through a space, we're not going to have any issues taking this into a game engine and having like a character walk around in it. So first noticeable thing with this person on the texture is we can see that this texture is way too big, or yeah, way too big, because the boards are almost as wide as the person. So that's something to kind of keep in mind as we go to the UV editor and we figure out what we want our sizes to be. I have pre-worked with these materials, and I do know that a good textile density for these materials that I created is actually going to be a 10.24 for a 2048 map. So I'm going to set that, and we can see that this looks a lot closer to probably what a person standing on this floor would be. Let's take this floor a little bit further, and I'm going to add a rug to it. It is meant to be kind of like a flat rug just sitting on the surface, so I don't really want to add an extra plane to this. Instead, I'm just going to kind of actually model the rug onto this floor. I'm going to do that by connecting these edges because I want this to be very even. So let's see. Maybe a, oops, that's a little too far. Not quite. We'll stick with that. That works pretty good. So I'm going to connect those. So I have this. I can then grab this face, and I'm just going to extrude it up just a little bit. Oops, I have my snap turned on. Let me turn that off. Or just set it a lot lower. Maybe a centimeter, because this doesn't need to be very tall for a rug. But we want it off the floor just a little bit. Next, I'm going to assign it to the correct material for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to expand my selection, since these edges are going to need that texture too. So I'm going to hit Shift and the period key for expand. You can also find that underneath Select Grow. That's just this one right here. I'm going to then right click on it, and I'm going to assign a new material. Choose the Lambert shader, and I'm going to call this one carpet or rug underscore mat. And let's choose my file of, I have this fabric. We got that. I do need to fix the texture on here though. So you see how it's kind of going the wrong way. The nice thing though, I'll show you this kind of trick, is if you have a single object with multiple materials on it, let's say that we need to select just the stuff with that one specific material. If you go to your hypershade window, which we haven't really explored too much with, because we're not really building a lot of crazy materials, there really hasn't been a use for this. But one of the really helpful things you can do in the hypershade is up here, we see all our materials. If you right click on that rug mat, I can say select objects with material. Even though it says select objects, since I have that object selected and I'm in the face select mode, it will actually just select the faces that have that material assigned to it. You see that? So then I can easily come over into my UV editor, Control-Shift-X to detach that and move those off. Multiple ways I could fix this unwrap, because it is kind of stretched on the side. Since it is such a simple shape, I can easily just do an automatic on this and then stitch this back together. Since all I need to do really to stitch it is just come on all those corners, just do a move and sew and get that stitched back up. I do want to set its textile density be the same as the floor, so I'm going to set that. And I'm going to rotate this one 90 degrees. Since I don't want it to look like that, that looks pretty silly. So let's rotate this. And I can start to try to position this. Notice that I am going to have a bit of a problem, as is. Maybe it looks kind of interesting that way. Maybe you want it to be this, but I don't really like how that looks. Do you see that? With the two on the side. Multiple ways I could fix this. The simplest solution, if I just don't really care, would be to come into here and just make it a smaller rug. Like I could come in, make sure my preserve UVs is checked. Let me save it real quick. And use my move tool and kind of make it a smaller rug. This is one possible solution. So we'll keep it at 46.5. Then this should be at negative 46.5 to keep it even. And, you know, if you can get away with that, that's going to be a lot easier to solve that problem. The other solution we could do, if we did want it to be big like that, is we could introduce another edge loop into here. and do our best to try to line it up. So I could always, you know, put it on the end. You know, put 2 on the end. I can even try one down the middle. Let's make sure that is at 0. This starts to get into like trickier uses of UVs. So, you know, if you're not comfortable with this, just make the rug smaller. Oops. There we go. Oh, shoot. Hold on. Some weird. Select that. There we go. Control Shift X to detach. And if you're lucky, there won't be a noticeable seam. The more organic a texture, the easier this is to kind of do. So we're like really close. You see that? So I might move this. So I can't go that way. So let me see if I can line it up like that. There we go. And if you're super careful, you can line it up. What does that look like over here? It's just these two. And all I did was kind of slide one until it met the seam of the, met the seam with the other one. So 2 solutions. Insert extra edge loops so that you can fix those seams, or just make your object a little bit smaller. And now we have that nice rug. Let's add a bit of a wall over here. So I'm going to start with a plane, just like the floor. And let's get it to the correct size. So let's make sure our height baseline is down. I'm going to make it about 3 meters tall. And that 5 meters wide. And take out all those subdivisions because I need to be able to place them myself. And let's get this rotated correctly. Close enough that I can fix it from here. And we'll get it positioned just so it's a little bit easier to see. It should be at -125. And I'm going to assign it the wallpaper material. So I'm going to right click, assign new material, since I haven't used the wallpaper one yet. And let's find it. Oh, sorry, blanking for a second. And it is a little bit too big. We do need to fix that textile density. So let me find it. And set it. So it isn't going to fit perfectly on there. It is a little bit too big, and that's fine. We don't just want the wallpaper. It is a little bit boring. We're going to want to add a little bit of trim at the top and the bottom. So it's okay that we see some seams because we can fix those. So I'm going to start by inserting my edge loop where I want that crown molding to be. I'm going to fix the number on this to make it a nice number. 285 should work. And then I'm going to assign it the correct material by selecting that face. I haven't used the trim yet, so I'm going to make a new one. Trim sheet, matte. And assign that material, assign that texture. Hold on, I think I did this wrong. There we go. This top, environment, trim sheet, base color. We can see it's really off right now. That's okay though. First things first, let's make sure that we are working with the UVs on this. So I'm going to select it, Control Shift X to detach it and move it back onto where that wood grain is. Now I can do some modeling with this. I would be, looking at references. What does crown molding look like? How can I make this look a lot nicer? I'm going to start first by extruding this out. Maybe moving this edge out. Make sure my preserve UVs is turned off. I don't need to do that. Let me delete these edges though. I don't need those. Maybe insert some edge loops. One here, here, and here. So that I can move this one inwards. I'm going to bevel that one too. Something like that. But let me push those in a little bit further. That, there we go. And I'm gonna make sure these edges are hard. They should be a little bit hard edged. Let's double check that those are. And we have, it's very simple, but we could go in and add some more detail, but for the sake of time, I don't want to spend too much more time working on that. So I could kind of go over some other things. Once I'm kind of satisfied with this, I do need to make sure my unwrap is still good with that. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to do a quick unfold optimize, reset it back to the correct textile density, and then straighten out that shell. Double check it is still on the wood grain where I want it. There we go, a nice little crown molding. We can do the same down here where we can introduce adding some wainscoting, a baseboard, and a chair rail onto here. So I'm going to do this by adding another cut. And I do want this to be so let's just do 1 meter off the ground. I stretched it. Let me turn on preserve UVs real quick. So I can move that, then turn it back off. This needs to be set now to our correct material. Since I already created that trim sheet, I can just assign it to an existing material. This is why it's important to make sure that we name it, because we only want one instance of this material. All right. Let's take a look at it on our unwrap. Let's make sure that we detach it. Control Shift X. And we are going to see that this is probably going to end up too big just to be flat across that, and that's fine. If this were being built from the real world, we wouldn't be building it out of one giant long fat board like this. It would be made out of individual wood boards. So we don't really want that wood grain to be consistent over the whole thing. So as we start cutting this up into smaller pieces, we can detach those smaller pieces and move them around so that the wood grain does look a little bit more natural. So I'm going to define where that chair rail is and the baseboard. Let me make sure that these are at nice numbers to makes my life just a little bit easier. Let's just do this at an even 10. And this one can be at an even 90. No, I'll go up a little bit higher. Let's do it at 96. Chair rails don't necessarily have to be too big. Well, no, I'm changing my mind. And that's fine. That's one of the nice things about this is you can kind of look at your reference and you can look at what you have and you can decide how big you want this. No, let's just do the 90. I'm going to show you something kind of neat with this. Okay. So let's build these. I'm going to actually do these both at the same time. So I'm going to extrude these out. Oh, I crashed it. Shoot. Give me 1 second. There we go. Word of warning, sometimes if you keep your UV editor open, it might crash. I also had that preserve UVs still checked when I was extruding, and it got very mad and confused. So, you know, it did it, but it got really confused, so it crashed. But we are back to where we were. So I extruded out the chair rail and the baseboard. I'm going to go ahead and delete out. I don't need these faces. It's just going to overly complicate things. So I'm going to delete out the faces I don't need on this wall from that extrude. And then I can start to form this. Let me do the baseboard first. This one can be a little bit simpler. I'm just going to kind of grab that and maybe, oops, let's turn off, set my step snap a little bit nicer. It doesn't need to be overly complex. Baseboards do tend to be pretty simple. So I'm going to leave it at that. The chair rail, though, I'm going to make it a little bit fancier. So I'm going to connect these two ends because I want it to be an even connect. So I'm going to select those two and do a connect with 2 segments. And I'm going to pinch them a little bit. Yeah, just like that. I'm then going to extrude this face inwards. Let me delete these. And I'm going to scale this face. I kind of want to make it a little bit more of like an angle like that. Let me do it a little bit more. And then I'm going to bevel this edge and this edge. Maybe not so much. I'm just trying to smooth it out a little bit. There we go. And now let me show you something. So I'm gonna go to my trim sheet, and I'm going to I'm going to work with this. I want to make it a little bit more interesting. So first, let me fix the baseboard. I'm going to select those 2 faces. Control-Shift-X to detach them to its own thing. I do know this needs to be wood, but I do need to do an unfold optimize on that. Make sure the textile density is set correctly, and let me straighten these out. I also need to do the chair rail I made, so I'm going to go ahead and select those faces. I'm just using that grow selection. Control-Shift-X to detach it. Unfold optimize, set its textile density, and orient this. But I want to make this a little bit fancier. So I could keep this all wood grain, but instead I'm going to go ahead and just grab this face right here and detach it. And then I'm going to slide it down. Oops. Hold on. Slide it down, and I'm going to put it over the bronze to kind of give it like an interesting sort of bronze strip going through it. It might be a little bit large, maybe like a little bit too much. So, you know, I can always undo that. And, you know, I kind of like where it's going, but it might be a little bit too much. Let me instead, I'm going to split this again. I think the big strip's going to be a little much, but I like where it's going, so I'm going to connect this. I'm not going to pinch it though. Let's just do it like that. Yeah. And then I'm just going to grab this face and this face, detach it, and slide it down into here. And that's kind of fun. That's kind of the fun with trim sheets, is we can start to add little details like this. So, while the extra cuts aren't adding to the silhouette of the shape, we added them so that we can do our unwraps with our trim sheet. So now that these are detached too, if we wanted to kind of wiggle the wood grain on this a little bit so it's a little bit different, like we can kind of slide this down. We select by UV shell, this is a little bit easier. Let me grab that one, move it down here, just so it does have a unique sort of look to it. All right, one last thing I kind of want to show you regarding this. Let's say that we wanted to add a little bit more detail to this, because it is pretty flat. Not super exciting, but I don't really want to do too many cuts more into this. It'd be kind of hard to like add some more detail without adding to a lot of geometry. We don't necessarily need to extrude things out all the time. It makes sense for this kind of stuff. It's a lot easier to work this way, but if we need to add something that's not really going with the flow of this, we can add extra shapes. Like so, for instance, I'm going to create a cube. Let me change the size of this to maybe like 50. Let's do it the other way though. We'll make this one 3, 50, and 50, like a little panel that we can work with against this wood. So let me see these sizes so I can maybe make a couple of adjustments to this before I commit. Let's see, so this is at 10. What did I set this to? 90. That means that this width is from top to bottom. 90 minus 10 is 80. So that means halfway would be 40 plus 10. So this needs to be at Y position 50 in order to be right in the middle of it. So let me set this. Oh, that's close. 48, 50. And I might be able to kind of fit this a little bit nicer. So let's change the size of this a little bit. A 60 works. Let's try 70. I think 70 is a little bit nicer. Yeah, I'll do 70. I like how it fits the space better. And let me delete the back off of this. And we can start to work with this as like a new kind of interest on here. Let me position it better too. So x1 negative 125, no 24. I'll set out negative 125. And let's assign it to that trim sheet material. And let's work then on the texture of this. So let me go to the UV editor. Again, it's a pretty simple box. So what I can do to unwrap this, since it is super simple, is just do an automatic and stitch it back together. Cut so, move and so. All the way around. And let's set that textile density correctly. And now we can position it. So, however we want to decorate this panel, do I want to try to play with these? That's a possibility. It might be a bit much for this, but we could, try to position this nicely to make a panel. But I think instead I'd rather just keep it kind of wood. I do want the wood grain going the other way. It'll make it a little bit more interesting the wood grain is going this way, have the wood grain go that way. we can then kind of model this out to look like a wooden panel. So I'm going to select this face. I'm going to extrude, but I'm going to use the numbers on here so that I can set it. I'm going to offset it because I'm going to make kind of almost like a, a picture frame kind of look to this. So I'm going to offset it by 5 centimeters. I'm going to then push it in a little bit. Maybe a little bit more. I'm going to pop it through. Okay. Let me move it out. There we go. And I'm going to be extra fancy. So let me extrude it inwards again, but not by as much. Maybe like 2. Nope, just 1. We're just going to do 1 centimeter. And there's that. Let's fix that unwrap super quick. I just need to do that unfold, optimize, set the textile density, and orient it again. So let's orient it back this way. But watch this. I'm going to go and select these faces right here. This one, this one, this one, and this one. I'm going to detach them. And I'm going to put these over here on the bronze to give it kind of like a fancier sort of look. The other thing I'm going to do is I am going to move my wood grain. Again, if this was being built, if we deselect this, it looks like this was kind of carved out of one giant panel. And we know that that's not how this would have been constructed. In fact, let me make sure that these are hard edged, because if this were constructed, this would have been made out of, different boards. So we want to make sure that it looks like it's actually made out of different boards. So I'm going to hard edge all of this to kind of give it that sort of framed look. And we're going to fix this. So this would be built out of a board. This would be built out of a board. This would be built, and this would be built, and then we'd have the panel. The wood grain needs to be going with the board, so parallel with the board. So this is going the wrong way, and that's what's giving it the look. Not only does it, you can see the wood grain kind of going, from one to the other, but it's going the wrong way. So I'm going to take the time to fix this. So I'm going to grab these faces, detach them. I'm going to rotate them the correct way and place them back on here. I want to kind of move it away from that board so that it doesn't look like it's made, and it can stick out. Remember, this is a trim sheet, so it does tile in these directions, so that's fine. And if we look now, this definitely has a much more natural sort of look. The nice thing, once this is created, I can then duplicate it. I don't need to model again. I don't need to unwrap it again. I can just hit Control D to duplicate it and move it down. I do want to make sure I'm placing these evenly. So this is at, let's see, where's this one? Negative 125. Oh wait, that's the wrong. It is this one. It's at 215. I'm going to make it an even 200. So that this one can be at an even, what does it look like at 100? It's a little bit too far. What does 150 look like? It's a little bit too close. We'll do this one at 225. No, I don't like that either. Let's see. What does 210 look like? So 210. We'll do 160. 160 is still 2 on top. The 150 looked pretty good. So let's do a little bit of math. 210 minus 150 is a difference of 60. So if this one's at 150, the next one's going to be at 90. Then the next one is going to be at 30. Then the next one's going to be at negative 30. And then the next one's going to be at negative 90. And then at negative 150. And then finally, again, that's not what I meant to do. Press the wrong shortcut. Let's try it again. Sorry. What did I say for this one? That was the negative 150. And then finally the negative 210. Last, before we attach this, notice since we did do our duplicate, we didn't have to unwrap it again, but it is keeping the same exact spot on that trim sheet, and we have a very noticeable tile. This makes it feel more like this was a manufactured, like fake printed wood grain rather than a natural wood grain. So it is worth the time to just come into your unwraps on these, just grab them and wiggle them. Like we can just kind of move these around. It takes a few moments. You might even want to move that brass a little bit too. So, take the time to do this. It's just a few seconds. It significantly makes your stuff look more professional to do this. So let me grab these, slide them over. You could even just do this as you're duplicating them. That's one of the nice reasons to have a dual monitor is you can just have your UVs up on one screen. So it's a lot easier to mess with this stuff. Let's take a few minutes and fix this last one. And there we have it. Oh, this one looks the same. Did I just manage to get these a little bit too close? Okay. Let's fix that panel. It's mostly the panels. Let me move that panel just a little bit off. Same thing with this one. It shows one a little bit too close to the previous. There we go. There we have it, a nice built wall. Let's attach these all together. So I'm going to select all of this and combine it and delete out all that history. So now we have our wall. One of the nice things too is if you were good about building these with good numbers, sizes and everything, this is very easy then to extend out. Like we could easily, make this hall as long as we need to now, because we could just duplicate this a couple times. Same thing with the floor. We can even just rotate this to start making corners. This is sort of the beginning of, like if you do get into environment art, the concept of building your environments in a modular way, so that we don't need to build the entire environment from scratch. We are just building individual pieces that we can stick together. So while that's kind of outside the scope of this course, like we don't really delve into this. If it is something that you're kind of interested in, this is kind of where you start to go with it, is building a modular piece. We could build like a little corner piece, like a little wooden thing to fit over that little gap. Same thing, we can just duplicate this, rotate this 90 degrees. We don't want to take a long time to model things if there's no reason to do it like multiple times. And we can make as many hallways as we want now. Same thing with if we did need the other side, we can just duplicate this. And if you are doing this for games, you don't do this in Maya. This would be something you would do in the game engine where you would just make one wall. You'd import one wall, and then you would just drop in as many versions of that wall that you need. And we can just build out an entire scene with just a couple of models. Hopefully you've found this video helpful and useful, and you've enjoyed working with the concepts of trim sheets.